And we are live. I'm really excited to have Becky Robinson joining Twinning Strategy today. She is the CEO and founder of Weaving Influence, a book marketing company, and the author of this awesome book, Reach, which I have been recommending to basically everybody I know. She's got her copy too. And I am going to actually just pass it over to you, Becky, and ask you what is on your mind.
Well, so today I participated in this conversation with actually the publisher that published my book. And what I noticed is that I was feeling deeply grateful to be a part of this author community. And what it moved me to do is to consider how I could be generous and contributing to the community. So I've been thinking a lot this afternoon because I had all these emotions bubble up during this visioning meeting that I was a part of, and I couldn't really figure it out. And I think it just ties back to that gratitude, which is fueling me to want to show up in ways to give of my time and energy to them.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I will say, one of the things that when, Becky, when you and I first met, and then when I read your book, this whole idea of generosity as a marketing tool is such an interesting, it's such an interesting sort of angle that I hadn't really heard before. I don't know if you want to sort of describe kind of how you sort of came to that thinking.
Sure. Well, one of the things I noticed as I was building my own online presence, I had this luxury because I started to build an online presence before I had anything to sell. And what I experienced was the generosity of others. I don't know, Jeff, if you've seen this, or Eric, but I kind of started out as a blogger, and I was trying to build relationships with people, but it wasn't really to any end besides like, hey, would you help me get my content out in a bigger way? And so as a result, I had all of these relationships where I had a chance to just give of myself and of this content that I was creating, but I wasn't really asking for anything.
Right.
So, go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Elena, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I had a question, just kind of philosophically, right? Marketing is very much seen as a work stream that pushes, sometimes a work stream that blows bubbles, sometimes the work stream that overblows, right? So here, your concept is completely opposite to all of that, right? And the market and the community is very much asking for this generosity and authenticity. So my question is, how do you bridge?
Well, that's a really good question. And what's showing up for me as you say that, Elena, because I know that you've had a corporate career in marketing, and Jeff, you as well. Yeah. I got to tell you, I never took a marketing class, and I never worked in corporate. So as a result, everything that I've learned about marketing, I've learned it just by doing it and showing up. And I wonder if the bridge is our collective humanity. Mm-hmm. And if the way to get closer to something that's actually going to work in terms of our marketing initiatives is to like strip out all the crap you learned in business school and just think about how people connect to people. And, people have these felt needs. And as we create content or want to market to people, we have to tap into that first. Could that be the bridge? What do you think?
I think it's an interesting. Oh, go ahead, Elena.
No.
So I was just going to say, I think that's an interesting point because I also, similar to you, Becky, come at this from having no idea what I was doing and then just kind of going out and and having some success. But one of the first things when I started consulting and then I later started a company, but when I first started consulting, I was like, I'm just going to talk and give advice and introduce people to people, help people get jobs, etc. Because you're building that human relationship with somebody, and they're going to hopefully someday, bring it back. Actually, there's one guy. He's like, you were always giving me stuff. I feel like I owe you or whatever. I said, one day I'm going to ask you for something, and you like the Godfather style, like you're going to not be able to refuse or whatever. But my point is like you get as much as you give. I think really is. Can be true. I absolutely think that can be true.
Go ahead.
So I was thinking back to what you said, in the word genuine, right? The word helpful and the word need. I think that is really where the bridge happens, because if there is a genuine need and as marketers we are helpful, useful, right, and address that need, that really bridges, I think.
I think it was really interesting. I was on a call earlier with a nonprofit that I've been helping, and one of the things that they are running into is this issue. Back to your point about humanity, is they keep trying to go from cold to, in that case, like donation, right? And the problem is that you can, I guess, but most of the time that's not really how we build our relationships, whether it was with people or with companies. That you have to go from cold to warm to, something, that is a more of a relationship, and then you can really have that conversation. I've come across this point so many different times in trying to sort of build my own business, or sort of learning about the sales process or whatever, is that if you try and jump from where you are to sale, or where you are to give me money or whatever, people are kind of like, why would I do that? But when you start from, I'm going to just go from, I don't know you, to let's get to know each other, it changes the whole conversation.
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of that, so generosity is one of, in my book, 4 commitments that I talk about that we need to be able to build an audience or reach people with our work. And the first one, it has to come first. It's value. And value is not only in content that we might create or expertise that we might add to a conversation, but it's also in the connections that we're making. And Jeff, I think that's what you're saying. Like, you can't go into a sales situation without building a relationship, or you can't ask for a donation when there isn't any background or history or, relationship there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a lot of what we ended up talking about, was this idea, like, let's actually stop focusing on fundraising and focus on building a community first. And if we build a community, the theory is, I hope it's right, is that the money will come. But I think that's right. I mean, I think part of the problem that I actually was, the president of the board of a very small nonprofit in Pennsylvania at one point. And we had that problem in all the time of nobody wanted to give us money. We didn't have enough volunteers or whatever. And if we had basically said, let's stop trying to do that stuff and start trying to build, to your point, the value, the connection, the generosity, the whatever, that we may actually be able to get more people, because, like, at least in that world, it's like what people really are looking for is they want to give back. That's what they want to do. And so asking them to go ask somebody for money doesn't feel like
not what they want to do.
So
I have a question that dovetail on this is there seems to be a shift, and maybe that's just because I'm meeting more people in the marketing world, but we've had a few guests who've brought up this kind of like, you got to give to get. And I feel like there's a shift, and I'm wondering what's driving the shift. And I guess one thought is like, is it the bombardment of everywhere we go, there's somebody trying to sell us something, and it's like, if you're just trying to sell, is that driving it? Is there something else you think that's driving this maybe slow, painful shift to give to get?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that one of the realities is noise and fatigue. And so for those of us who want to rise above the noise, we need something that helps us stand out. And so when you show up with generosity, I think it's disarming. People don't expect it. It maybe wakes us up just from, being glassy-eyed or like from all the noise that's surrounding us. I know for me, when I'm out on social media channels, for example, and interacting, what stands out for me or what gets my attention is when someone's contributing something that I didn't expect, whether it's like a new idea or whether it's like support of someone else. So I think potentially that the noise and the overwhelm is causing the shift that we're seeing. I don't know. What do you all think?
I also think, it might be the building on the noise point, especially with the arrival of AI, how easy it is to create this noise. And contributors value volume over value, right? And I think that actually creates part of the problem, because it's easier to repost or forward something half relevant than process your post, think about it, and build on it, right?
So go ahead, Becky.
Well, I was going to say my team has noticed, just in doing some behind the scenes study of LinkedIn, for example, that sometimes your like well-considered comment on someone else's LinkedIn post can actually help you get more traction in attracting an audience than creating your own content, which is interesting, and an experiment potentially for those who might be watching to try.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Eric and I met with, we always refer to Hannah as our favorite social media marketer, but she is awesome. But we had dinner with her last night, met her in person live for the first time, but we were talking about this very topic about LinkedIn, because I'm a little bit obsessed with like, how do you, get boosted on LinkedIn? And I'm pretty sure that like I'm in like the LinkedIn doghouse right now for something that I did. I don't know what it is. And so she's been sort of giving us a sense of what it is that LinkedIn is looking for. And I think, it's interesting. I absolutely have noticed that when you repost other people's content, it does not get as many impressions, because they want people to drive, they want people to, actually create something new and provide some value. Definitely true that they, are actually, Hannah sent us an article the other day, but it was talking about the fact that when you comment, it's, I don't know if it's like a point system, I don't know how the algorithm works, but like when you comment on other people's stuff, the more you are basically creating an opportunity to create dwell time for other people on LinkedIn's platform, the more they are going to boost your boost your presence. And so it's interesting how that, I think, is creating some of, Eric, what you were talking about, this shift of, they're basically saying, we don't want people just, selling their stuff and then sort of, running away and whatever. We're not interested in that. That's not the kind of platform that we're trying to create. So anyway.
Well, and yes, and I mean, I think that potentially what we want and what the social media platform wants are in conflict with each other.
That's possibly true.
It seems like they're doing a really good job of getting us to twist ourselves into knots to get the exposure for our ideas, which,
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about, or not mixed feelings about.
Feelings about, I have been doing this, just an experiment this week with the whole collaborative articles. I know, Elena, you've done some of those before, and I find them so super weird. I hope that doesn't, get me in trouble with the LinkedIn job.
I actually learn more from them. I used to give and write a lot of them, but what my favorite thing to do is actually read about what other people say. And again, it's sifting through a lot of noise, but sometimes there are some really interesting new tools. So I actually kind of do it as a tool scout exercise, really. But I'd like to go back to your point earlier, Becky, and say, okay, so generosity in marketing is novel, it's refreshing, it's something that all the user, the buyer, the community, all of them want, right? But then our listeners might say, okay, well, how? Exactly what do I do? So I would love to hear your perspective on a few like examples and ideas of how people can do it.
Sure. Well, I think that it all starts with an attitude. And so the attitude is like one of openness rather than one of scarcity. So we might, be tempted to hoard our ideas or our energy or our time if we think there's not enough of it. But if we start from a place of an abundance mentality that there is more than enough, then we bring this openness. So that's like kind of at the base of generosity. I don't think I wrote about that, but it's what's showing up for me in this moment.
Yeah.
In terms of generosity, I like to think about giving almost everything that we have. So it's partly giving our ideas. There's an author who published also with Barrett Kohler Publishers, Lily Zhang, and Lily has given away all of their best ideas in long form LinkedIn posts. And the end result of that is not what you would think. The end result is not that no one buys their book. The end result is that they are seen as an expert. The end result is that people want all of Lily's best ideas in one place. So the end result is actually that people buy the book, right?
Yeah, I am one of the people who bought their book.
Oh yeah, awesome.
I listened to it. I was like, I see Lily Zhang all over the place. I'm really just curious that what they have to say, and it's really I really enjoyed it. So yeah, absolutely agree. I'm a case study.
So, but what I hear from authors who have a scarcity mentality is like, I need to protect my book. I need to keep the ideas back. Like, I'm writing my book right now. I shouldn't share the ideas. Like, well, of course you should, because sharing your ideas in small parts over time is what draws people to you. It's what makes them aware of your book. And so I don't know that you can give away too many of your ideas. I've noticed all of my best ideas about marketing, you could go like watch my YouTube videos. You could go listen to my podcast. You don't necessarily need to hire me for my course or my, coaching, because it's all out there on the internet, right? Like, it's pretty much any resource that I might package in a product, for example. It's all out there. Jeff, you signed up for my course. Thanks. And I love that. But like, it's all out there for free somewhere. And I'm not worried about that.
Right. Well, and I think for me, it was like, I was so, I loved what you said in the book. And what I really want to do is be like in there and like really understand more of it and go deeper into it and ask you questions live. I mean, it's just, it's fascinating to get connected with the people who, came up with the ideas and ask them what were you thinking, what were you talking about. And I think that's absolutely right. That you just, and I loved you make a point in your book about this idea of like all the content you can create from one piece of content.
That was a great point. I love that.
And I think that's a really good point, is because it's not like people hear your idea, like you as the person who came up with the idea, who talks about it all day long and thinks about it all day long, are like, oh my God, I talk about this all day long. But the people that you're talking to are not thinking about it all day long, and they are not hearing it and understanding. And so they're getting, like, the first time they hear it, they maybe understand, let's say they understand sort of 50% of like, oh, that's what, Becky's saying. And then the second time it's 75, and then it's 90, and then it's, then they get to like a higher plane of understanding or whatever. I mean, we do this all the time. I mean, I'm right now, I'm like really interested in, I won't go into like the details of this, but this guy named John Boyd. And so I've probably listened to 5 books about John Boyd, right? I mean, and yes, I hear the same things over and over again, but it's still interesting, and I learn something new, and from every different angle that I hear it. And so I think that's sort of what you're talking about, is it's okay to give this stuff away, because what people really want is you, right? That's what you're really marketing.
So can I ask, I just want to throw a controversial direction in this conversation, because so I agree that you can give away a lot, but there is a way that you can give away too much. And Elena, we were talking about like all these people who ask you to do like, 8-hour projects for an interview, or, I start giving consulting advice to people, and then they keep having me come back and ask me more questions. And it's just like, there is a point where people are using you for your expertise, and they're taking advantage of your generosity. Can you comment? Like, there's a line, and it's a fine line, but I'm wondering, like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And what shows up for me about that, Eric, is that, there may be this public sharing of what you know, right? So I can be as generous as I like in a LinkedIn post, on a podcast episode. That's kind of content that I'm putting out there that people can consume, and that scales. because I share it once and then people can access it. I think what you're talking about, Eric, is, is it okay? Can I still be generous and have boundaries around my time? Of course. Generally speaking, if someone is interested in talking with me, I might schedule a 30-minute call. And, if I'm working toward a proposal with them, I might schedule another call. But for the most part, like, there's a limit to that, right? Like, with our time, that doesn't scale. I can't give away all my time all the time and still run a profitable business. Right. So I think, Eric, your instinct is right. And it's about those scalable assets that we create, that we can be generous with those. And, we can be generous with our time as it's available to be generous and as the occasion warrants. But of course, we're all in charge of choosing. And, if I schedule 30 minutes with someone and I have a little space, I might choose to go over the 30 minutes, or I can say, hey, we've come to the end of our time. I'll send you follow-up and next steps. And that doesn't mean I'm not being generous, but it's just that I have to protect my time in order to give my best energy to the people who are paying for it, or who are part of my family, or who really get that unlimited access to my energy.
I think that's a really great point. It's about being generous where you can be generous, and not being generous, not necessarily not being generous, but be recognizing where you have scarcity. I think that's a really great point. I told you I was going to do this before we hopped on. I'm going to ask you. All right.
Oh, I think Jeff froze for a minute.
No, I've got Jeff. He's got some dumb AI.
I think you froze. I think ChatGPT decided
to make ChatGPT not have. I don't know. Anyway, so no, I was going to ask you. So, all right. Would you prefer? I'll ask you two questions. Would you prefer thought-provoking or absurd first? Or do you don't care?
I always go absurd first.
All right. This is I swear ChatGPT literally is the collective stupidity of the internet. It asks me if you could add a scratch and sniff feature to any book genre, which one would you choose?
Well, cookbooks, of course. I want to smell the delicious food while I look at the cookbook.
So
I was thinking like noir, and you could have it smell like gunpowder or something. I don't know. All right,
this one's better. I don't know if this next one is thought-provoking, but it's interesting. It's a good question for you. What is the strangest marketing? I don't know. It calls it a gimmick, but you get the idea. What's the strangest marketing gimmick that you've ever tried that actually worked?
Strangest marketing gimmick.
Or if you don't like that one, what's the most creative way you've ever convinced someone to buy a book besides bribing them with chocolates?
Man, I mean, both of those are hard.
Yeah.
Does it involve sequined, rainbow sequin jackets? Because that's how Elena was using.
I think selling books is one of the hardest things there is. Particularly because of the noise and the number of books that are released every year. I think the place where authors fail is they think that if they publish a book, that people will buy it just because, and you really have to ask people to buy your book. Jeff, are you listening? When your book comes out, you really have to ask people to buy your book. But yeah, I don't know that I have any gimmicks, nor do I have any creative ways that I've convinced people to buy books. Just ask them.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And it's interesting because it's, I am 100% certain that I have not done all the things that I need to do, which is why I'm taking your course. But it is interesting. I mean, the more you sort of go out there and ask people, I've found people tend to be really interested,
So I have a question on this, Becky. So you start with having this relationship, right, with the audience, or establishing it, and you ask them per se to buy a book. At some point, it tips into the audience gets bigger and the audience wants to buy the book, right? What makes it tip?
I think longevity and value over time. So if you think about the people who are best-selling authors, I think you get to be a best-selling author one of two ways. Either you start out as famous or celebrity, And so, of course, you're going to get a huge, 6 or 7 figure advance, and your book will fly off the shelves because you're Britney Spears or whatever. So that's like one path to being a bestseller. I think the other path is like this slow, deliberate path where, it might take 1 or 2 or 3 books to build that audience. So on nonfiction books, I think it can take kind of that long slog over time. And in the introduction to my book, I talk about Brené Brown, and I like to use her as an example because typically anytime I meet a female nonfiction author, like they want to be Brené Brown or they want Brené to endorse their book or whatever. And we think that Brené was like this overnight success. And maybe you're listening to this and you don't even know her name, but she's among the best known female thought leaders. Right. Well, you know that for at least 10 years before her TED Talk went viral, she was writing and researching and sharing and showing up with value. And since that time, it's been another 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so I think anyone who's going to make a big impact, unless you have some kind of like factor of, the institution that you're connected to, or, right, already pre-existing fame and audience, it really just takes showing up with consistent value over time for a long time. There's not really any shortcut to that.
Yeah. So it's interesting, Becky. I read right around the time I read your book, I had just read Dory Clark's The Long Game. Mm-hmm. Sort of has that same, that's sort of the point I think she makes there as well, is you have to just keep showing up, keep doing stuff and so forth. So I think that's.
And her journey shows that too.
Yeah.
I think there is this piece where you have to write great content as well. So like if you write a bunch of mediocre books and you release them one after the other, you're not likely to get that kind of snowball of traction. But if you write, good content, great content, and you work really hard at it, the hope would be that over time you'll continue to grow that audience and they'll be there waiting for the next book. But I think even when they're there waiting for the next book, you still have to ask them to buy it. Yes. I don't know if you've ever taken a look at John Gordon. John Gordon's wrote a ton of business book parables, and he has a huge email list. I think I talk about him in my book. But I'm sure that when he has a new book come out, he's like going out to the list to tell them, hey, here it is. It's time to buy it. Right. And if he didn't do that, they might not know it was coming and they might not buy it.
Yeah, so it was interesting that you say that because Kim Scott just the other day, because her new book, Radical Respect, just came out, and in her LinkedIn newsletter, she actually sent out, it was entitled, something about something and a new book and a favor or something. And she literally, like you said, she was asking people to go pre-order her book, whatever. And she explained the whole, all the reasons why, and just, that went out to her. I mean, I'm sure her newsletter list is a lot larger than mine, but, I definitely have a link to that, because at some point when I'm ready, I want to do that with my, with my list as well, because, if Kim Scott can do it, I also can do it.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear how her new book's doing.
Yeah. I don't know.
I listened to it. Also listened to it the other day,
how is it?
It's good. I mean, it's. I don't know that I will be like quoting Radical Respect the way that I quote Radical Candor in 5 years, but it's still a really solid book. And I also, because it's, it touches on a lot of the things that Lily, who we were talking about before, that they talk about in their book. So, it was like, maybe I read them a little too close together, but I think, not to say I think it was a great book and I would recommend it. Absolutely. But there's something so special about that Radical Candor. And what was actually funny is I was on a call with a biotech person today, and he's like, oh, we're in an offsite today and blah, blah, blah. It's all about this concept of radical candor. I'm like, oh, Kim Scott, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, this is a concept that is now like a fun, it's like Carol Dweck, Kim Scott, and some of these other things. Like, everybody who thinks about these things knows who she is. So.
Hey, my daughter, say I'm recording a podcast. Babe. I'm sorry. Love you. We're almost wrapping it up.
Okay, we never had 5 guests on at the same time, so that was the first time. Actually, that being a lead in to the fact that we are coming up on the half hour, as promised, Becky, we're going to go around and each say one thing that we want to leave the audience with. And as I also mentioned, we always make our guests go first because we don't want to give you any time to think. So we're going to give you the microphone to say one interesting thing, one take home, whatever you want to talk about. And then
all right. Well, I think that I need a few more like creative gimmicks or initiatives to get people to buy books. And I think sequins need to be involved. But in seriousness, I think that I could do some content around this idea of limits to generosity, or, you know, how do you articulate what you can be generous with and where you need to give yourself permission to take care of your own energy.
You need somebody to talk to and interview about, this concept. I'm volunteering.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
Thanks. Collaborate with you on that.
Awesome. We should do that for sure.
Yeah. Elena or Jeff, who wants to jump in?
I could go next because I really was on the same exact subject. And what I really appreciated is, Becky, when you said, I'm very generous in the areas that can scale, that can contribute to a lot of people, that can create a lot of value, right? But at the same time, when I'm talking about like resources versus ROI on my business, I have to mind that. So I think it's a great framework for many businesses and for many marketers, and generally speaking, for many leaders who are public personas and who have public presence, to just kind of balance out how they approach it. So I really like that.
I will, before I jump in with my one thing, Becky, what is the best way for people to reach you?
So you can see my email address there on the screen, becky@weavinginfluence.com, especially for those listeners to this podcast, watchers of this video. If you email me, becky@weavinginfluence.com, and tell me that you found me by Twinning Strategies. If you're in the US, I'd love to sign a copy of my book and get it out to you. If you're around the world, I have a PDF I can send you. That's the limits of my generosity there. But I would love to hear from you. And you can find my business at weavinginfluence.com. You can find my kind of personal entrepreneur author site at beckyrobinson.com. And I primarily use LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, where my handle is my first name, Becky, my last name, Robinson, without the vowels, RBNSN. Don't ask me why I picked that decades ago or whatever, but that's where you find me. And I dig Threads. Come talk to me there.
And I'm going to plug your book here to go to Amazon or Audible or wherever. Oh, upside down. Yeah, there we go. Reach. It has a lot of great ideas in it. Jeff, go ahead with your one thing.
Sure. I would say for me, obviously with a book launch imminent of my own, I think your point about asking, but I think what's really interesting as I think about it is, I have been, I guess you could say, generous with my content in the sense of, and actually this was something you recommended a couple of weeks ago, was to actually go bite the bullet and actually do the newsletter. So on LinkedIn, so glad I did that. And giving, content every week to people. And so when I go and when I ask, it's like they know what, there's been some, I'm not just asking cold, right? I'm asking for, just people who have actually, have been, clearly like my content because they seem to open the emails every week. So that's my one thing. Eric, I'll let you finish it up.
Yeah. My one thing is what you said, Becky, about it's not about the each piece of the content and like giving everything away, and that's going to somehow, ruin, spoiler alert, it's ruining all of your value. That the value, you still have something to say and something to bring when you bring it all together, when you bring your thought process. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that not only are you giving this stuff, but you have experience around it. You have you've thought about it more than most people. And that is what you're bringing to the table, not necessarily the individual pieces. And that's where the value is. And I think that's a really interesting thought process of creating value by giving away the concept, but then they want to come to you because you really, really get it. The thing that you're the expert in. And I think that's really interesting. So we're going to wrap up here. Becky, thank you so much for being on this podcast. As always, we just zipped through. It's actually, we're on minute 35. So it's always the fastest half hour of the week. And we loved having you. So thank you. And look forward to interacting with you and hearing more about what you're up to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.